Welcome to EduTalks Canada, the podcast that explores the diverse landscape of education in the Great White North. In today's episode, we delve into a topic that resonates deeply with many of our listeners: the mental health challenges faced by immigrant students in Canada. As a nation celebrated for its inclusivity and multiculturalism, Canada warmly welcomes students from around the globe. Yet, beneath the surface of this welcoming embrace lie unique struggles that immigrant students encounter as they navigate their educational journey in a new country. Join us as we uncover the layers of this important issue, examining the cultural, academic, and social factors that impact the mental well-being of immigrant students. Through insightful conversations and personal reflections, we'll shed light on the experiences of these students and explore ways to support their mental health needs effectively. So, whether you're an educator, a student, or simply someone interested in the intersection of education and mental health, this episode is for you. Stay tuned as we embark on a journey to better understand and address the mental health challenges Canada's immigrant students face. Welcome to EduTalks Canada.
We are back to a new episode of EduTalks Canada, and today with me I have a really special guest. It's Ruben Gagarin. Hi Ruben, thank you for joining. I'd like to mention quite shortly that Ruben is psychiatrist in Toronto, and he's my colleague's partner, my colleague who you have heard in the first episode, Olga. Ruben, thank you for joining. Now, I am not well versed in the different types of credentials that you have, and I know you're very much experienced, educated, and I would like you to toot your own horn, so to speak. Could you let our listeners know about yourself, please?
Okay, well, hello everyone. My name is Ruben Gagarin. I'm a licensed child and adolescent and young adult psychiatrist working in Scarborough, Toronto. As many of you, I am also an immigrant. We came to Canada in 2002. I completed my medical school and postgraduate in education back at home in Russia. But when I came here, only my medical school was recognized. As many of you may know that in medical field, medical school provides mostly a theoretical background and basic knowledge, and most of the doctors, they gain their practical skills and specialization in after medical school and postgrad training. So as such, my credentials are that I completed my medical school back in Ufa, Russia. I did my postgraduate psychiatric training in Buffalo, New York, at State University of New York.
Wow.
And for the past 13 years or so, I have been working at Scarborough Health Network. It changed names, I think, twice since I started, but it is still the same hospital. I don't have much of research experience, but not doing research helped me to do a lot of clinical work. So I have seen hundreds, actually at this point, thousands of patients who come through different channels: outpatient, emergency room, inpatient.
Wow.
I have a lot of experience.
So, Ruben, we will be talking a little bit about practically how we advise students. Now, myself, as an international student advisor and being a licensed immigration consultant, I'm not the best person sometimes to identify mental health issues or maybe some of those triggers to watch out in students. So, we will. This podcast is to give international students an idea on mental health, how to access perhaps in-house counselors, how to access services that are provided by you, etc. But before we begin all that, let's turn back the time or turn back the clock a little bit to your journey as a student in Buffalo, because Olga has mentioned this story to me, and I find it very interesting. And it may be interesting to listeners who are exploring a similar background to yourself and studying in different cities, like the family is in a different city and you're in a different city. How did that whole commute work? How was that experience? How long did it take until you were finished graduating, and what happened?
So, essentially, that medical field is special. So it is the highly protected field. And since I did my postgraduate training in Buffalo, a lot of things changed, I'm sure, over the past 13, 14 years. Actually, plus 5 years, so that would be like 19 years when I started my residency training in Buffalo. So I can't really advise on how to get the license for like medical license. But what I can say that for us as fresh immigrants, when I came to Canada, I didn't think that I could become a doctor, let alone be a psychiatrist, because my language skills were very basic. So I had to look up a lot of basic words. I could communicate on a kind of tourist level, meaning that I could survive in a city, like buy food or like order food in a restaurant or like book a hotel room. But that was the level of my language. I could not ever dream to master enough language to speak with native speakers and be able to kind of catch nuances of what they're saying, kind of, like interplay between the words and a tone and etc. So what happened was that Olga, my wife, she landed in Canada a few months before me. So I left, I stayed back for a few more months because she had no income. And at that point I did. So that I came here for a couple of weeks. We settled, my wife and my son. And then I went back for a few months before I finally came to Canada. So when I arrived, she had better language skills and she had some connections. She went through the new landed immigrants program. I think it still existed, called Skills for Change.
Yes.
So it's non-for-profit organization. A lot of such organizations help new immigrants in Canada. And Olga enrolled me in there pretty much like first or second week. She said that I have nothing else to do anyway. So I had no job, I had like no friends or nothing. So she enrolled me into that. She showed me how to use streetcars and subways, and then I started. And long behold, some stars aligned, and in my group, there were half of the group were physicians. That is very unusual. So because Skills for Change program for medical health professionals is designed for lab techs, not even nurses, just kind of, entry-level healthcare workers. But half of my 20 people group was physicians who were trying to get license in Canada. But they were just maybe a couple of months ahead of me. So they did not know all the nuances. So they only knew what is kind of written on the website. And it seemed to them that the process was very straightforward. And the way how they presented it to me, there was just one book. It's 1,200 pages, pretty thick book that I need to almost pretty much memorize. And if I do so, I can pass a couple of exams. I get through residency training, and then I can become a doctor. So it seemed to be kind of straightforward enough. So the kind of second week, I went to a bookstore, bought that book for something like $300. So it was a very expensive book. And only then I realized that it's not so much a book as a set of notes. So essentially, it's pretty much just notes, like line by line, facts that I need to remember. There's no connections, there's no explanation or anything. It just kind of answers to potential questions. And then later on, in a few more months, I met someone who told me that what is not written on the website is the chances of me getting into residency program. And at that point, in the beginning of 2000s, I had about 0.3% chance of getting into residency in Canada. So, and
Wow.
about 50% chance of getting into residency in the US.
Hmm.
Chances were much better for the US. So I also took prep courses for US exams and Canadian exams. And then
Yeah.
I started my residency in Buffalo in 2005, 3 years after I landed in Canada. And
Hmm.
5 years later, I got my position in Scarborough,
Wow.
so
Now,
Toronto.
I'm just trying to recollect. Did you say that this was perhaps in 2002, 2003 at that point of time, right?
We landed in 2002, and by
Okay.
2005, I already got position. So, yeah, it took
Okay.
about a year to find it.
So approximately 20 years next year. Now, is
Yeah,
it quite similar even now for people coming from abroad if they are trying to get into residency, etc.? Is that what you mentioned earlier?
it's hard for me to say.
Yeah.
So that the process is similar for sure,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
these nuances they make a huge difference.
Yeah.
So, as I sort of implied before, that what is written on websites, I'm pretty sure that not much changed. But
Mm-hmm.
these nuances, the chances of getting into a particular program that might be quite different.
Yeah.
And a lot of my friends who came here with medical degree from back home, they
Yeah.
changed their vocation. So they became,
Mm.
many of them became ultrasound technicians, for example. So there are
Oh, wow.
pathways.
Yeah.
But it's not becoming a physician is not exactly straightforward all the time because of these nuances.
And once you have your credential from America, is it an easier transition into Canada to get a license or to be licensed to practice?
Well, there's a process so that Canada uh, is accepting
Hmm.
American training. However,
Hmm.
Canada is still different from the US, so they have their own system of confirming credentials.
Yeah.
What I had to do is for about a year, I had to work under supervision. And while I did that, I took final exams for Canada, and only then I was able to get my independent license. So at this
Wow.
point, I don't have to work in a hospital. I do work in a hospital. I like this challenge, but
Yeah.
I might as well just open private practice if I wanted to.
I see. Okay. But you don't see clients privately at the moment?
Well, I see them as an outpatient in a clinic.
I
So
see.
the
I see.
difference is
Okay.
that in private practice, I am in charge of who I am accepting, who I'm declining.
Got it.
So in the hospital, I don't have that choice. And to be
Got it.
honest, a lot of the time I would not choose some of my clients. I would
Got it.
rather not to work with them. But
Yeah.
they present in interesting cases and complex, challenging.
Yeah.
I don't. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and that's very similar to our role as licensed immigration consultants. When we have our own private practice, we can decide which clients we want to take on. But when we are working for an institution, obviously we have to serve everyone equitably, right? So that's good to know. I know Olga had a funny story about you commuting between Buffalo and I think St. Catharines. You used to live at the time, or Olga lived
Yeah.
there. And
So the way how it worked for us is was that see the first year of postgraduate training, medical training, is internship,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
that is very demanding. So
Mm.
that basically calls on people to the doctors, like young doctors, to wake up at like 4 a.m. in the morning, be in the hospital by 5. So
Wow.
be able to present the patients by 6 a.m. and we usually got home by maybe 8, 7.
Oh, wow.
So that it's very long week. So for the
Yeah.
first 2 years of that kind of grueling work, I essentially rented an apartment in Buffalo. I bought a car, and I kind of settled there for 2 years. And
Yeah.
Olga and our oldest son, they stayed back in Toronto. So I commuted here every week on the
Ooh.
weekends. So that went on for 2 years.
Yeah.
Occasionally, they came to visit me. So my son went to like a camp in New York State, but essentially that we had to maintain kind of long distance relationship for some time. And then
Yeah.
2 years later, we bought a house in St. Catharines. That is, on a good day, it's about 45 minutes commute to Buffalo.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not too bad. Like
Not
some
too bad.
people in
Yeah.
Toronto commute like hour and a half to work. So
Yeah.
um, and sometimes I would get stuck on a bridge, like crossing the border, but usually it wasn't such a big
Yeah.
problem.
If
Uh,
it's a long weekend or something like that. Yeah.
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 Uh,
So that's yeah, because Olga has told me that story a number of times, when we are at work, and it's always it's also to highlight the struggle that new immigrants go through, and also when you're trying to achieve something for the family as a unit, right? You're kind of going through that process, and I just wanted to highlight that for our listeners who to let them know that we all face certain challenges or different types of challenges, and be prepared for that as well. Now, moving on to your practice, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, when I might be a first point of contact for a lot of international students, and knowingly or unknowingly, I have to look out, or I have to kind of look out for signs of I wouldn't put it very deeply as mental health issues, but at least for signs of or certain signs to see if someone needs help from a mental health aspect, right? And our first response is to ask the student to visit the counselor, the in-house counselors that we have at our campus. Now, we cannot particularly force our students to go. We suggest it, and we let them know that this is how you can make the booking. And for the most part, people don't necessarily go, but of course we have a crisis counselor, and if there's anything that's super emergency, then we kind of, okay, you need to come with me, right? um could you let our listeners know, in terms of, I mean, this is also some knowledge for me as an advisor to students, what are the signs we can look out for in a student that we may think, okay, they need mental health help, right?
well, before I answer your question, it's something I picked up on when you mentioned that sacrifices that we have to make for our families and for the
Yeah, sure,
future.
go ahead. Yeah.
See, it's a immigration is a long-term project. If you're doing it for someone else, even for your children or your wife or your parents, it tend to lead to burnout. So I think that
Yeah.
that there is a balance between finding something for yourself, so kind of overcoming challenges and sort of adapting to the new environment, and sort
Yeah.
of uh, doing something for yourself just as important as doing something for others. Because
Yeah.
if you just kind of focusing on like this, like I'm going to sacrifice myself for my family,
Yeah.
it's a losing battle. Because then
Yeah.
you get like a 14-year-old teenager who doesn't want to even have a meal together with you, and then you feel,
Yeah.
well, I sacrificed my whole life to like for you to have that meal in front of you, and then you don't
Yeah.
want to even talk to me, and then all of
Yeah.
a sudden it becomes like all sorts of psychological problems that you putting on your children who didn't ask you to sacrifice anything.
Yeah.
So for them, I'm thinking that like what worked very well for us is that we both sort of found something for ourselves.
Got it.
I kind of described what I was doing, and my wife simultaneously she was working on her business degree and MBA. She was making her business career, so that basically she did not. I'm sure that she did not feel that I'm sacrificing for her, she's sacrificing for me. So it kind of just work as a kind of equal relationship, as a team, exactly.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, is that there are it's a two-tier question. Is that if you become a first point of contact for the international students, realistically, I don't know if there is much that you can do in terms of like diagnosing mental health issues and predicting how they're gonna handle it. Especially when it comes to severe mental health issues, something like bipolar disorder or psychosis. Immigration in general increases risks of people presenting with psychosis or bipolar disorder. I'm talking about severe mental illness. And that is related to that stress and pressure that the environment presents and a lack of support, I suppose. However, the first tier is that what kind of safeguards you can offer your clients. I know that international students, they are required to have a medical insurance.
Yes.
So anecdotally, my mother, who passed away 10 years ago as of today. So today is the day, 10 years anniversary. So she passed away, but in 2011, she visited us here and she caught a viral pneumonia, something similar to COVID. Who knows? Maybe it was some sort of coronavirus, because coronavirus existed even before COVID-19. But she had a viral pneumonia, and she ended up in a hospital in ICU for 2 weeks. Wow. And each day cost like over $2,000. So then after that, she spent another week in a regular unit, which was $1,500 a day. Then so essentially I was hit with a hospital bill for like $80,000.
Oh my goodness.
So, and $50,000 of that was covered by her insurance, but we also had to fight for it because to prove that her acute viral pneumonia was not pre-existing condition when she arrived to Canada like 2 months before. So I'm laughing because, again, the acute viral pneumonia is an infection that develops in a matter of days, not like 2 months that people come with. So in any case, what I'm trying to say is that medical care in Canada is very expensive. So on one hand, if you go to see your family doctor, it's like $100. And some colleges and universities, they offer pretty much free medical care, so that's not even an issue. However, if someone ends up in a ends up needing long-term medical care or mental health care, it may go into hundreds of thousands of dollars. I remember that I had an international student just a couple of years ago. She was in high school, as a matter of fact, which is unusual. So she developed bipolar disorder. Typically, people develop bipolar disorder sometime in the first few years of secondary school, like age 18 to 20. So she was something like 16 or 17. So she developed bipolar disorder, and she spent in our hospital, I want to say, a month. So again, we're talking about at least $1,000 a day. I don't know exactly the number. So and then she was transferred to a state hospital where I spent another, I think, about 3 months, because before she wasn't in any shape to return back home. So she had very supportive family. Her mom was at home. She was a very nice kid. Like any other medical illness, this was completely unpredictable. She was an A student. She was doing very well. She had friends, very social, charismatic, engaging. Nobody could even ever imagine that she would have a severe mental illness. So and her insurance in particular, it didn't really pay very well. If I don't remember all the details, but it went something like her full insurance
And that is a very important point, actually. So that when her parents, her mother, spoke with her, so when she signed up her daughter, like she cared a lot about her daughter, so she signed up sign up for this insurance, and the coverage was something like $1 million. So to any parent, that would be saying, like it's there's no an issue, so that that $1 million would cover like whatever. But there is like in small font at the bottom. It would say that it only covers 25,000 per occurrence. And then you say, well, what is the occurrence? Well, occurrence means like hospitalization, but her hospitalization was thousands of dollars. So not 25. It was probably like close to 100,000 or maybe more. So essentially, that insurance that on the paper it says $1 million, but it wouldn't cover more than 25,000. And also, mental health tends to be neglected. That in that particular insurance, I remember they also said that it would not cover similar conditions.
No.
And in mental health, you can make a case that a lot of the conditions are similar. So it's not. It's just not possible if someone is healthy physically, but then they have mental health issues. So it's just not. Even in theory, it's not possible to use up $1 million in a year. So at that point, I can say $1 billion, $100 billion. It's just not possible to. So I can create whatever. Like I can put down any number.
Yeah.
So what I say that in summary, that step one is that it is important to read the contract for insurance and make sure that if a child ends up in a hospital, that something like at least $100,000 will be covered. So the second point is it's not so much about mental illness per se, but it's more about ability to adjust to a new environment. So, for example, maybe I would ask a person a question: if a parent sends their kid to another country for 2 years of high school or 4 years of high school or college, has the child ever been away from their parents?
Very important.
So it's a very important question, because you're sending somebody away for a year, maybe more. But if they have never been away for more than a night, how do you know that they're going to survive? Can they do their own laundry? Can they pay their own bills?
And it takes us back to the first episode where Olga mentioned that both of you were exploring university. Like, maybe your son will be studying abroad, maybe in America and things like that. So that's a good segue to kind of say, okay, what as a father, I'm asking you. I asked Olga as a mother, like she said, I want my son to study abroad and get that experience. What do you see in your son? Do you think he's ready? I'm asking as a professional, like a psychiatrist.
So that's the thing. So that I cannot be professionally looking at my children.
Yes,
because
that's true.
I don't see them the same way. What I can say though is that in my practice as an inpatient psychiatrist, a doctor who works in a hospital for people who get admitted overnight, we don't allow parents to stay with their kids. So essentially, it's an individual assessment. Often, even just today, we had a new patient, and their parents have had really hard time letting the kid go to stay overnight in a hospital, because never before they stayed overnight anywhere outside home.
Wow. Okay.
So, and I'm talking about hospital, medical professionals. It's a safe environment, etc., etc. And parents themselves, they felt very anxious because they never experienced that before. The kid themselves was fine, so they did not have like much of anxiety, what have you. But the parents, they were like extremely anxious. But it may happen the other way. So, and that what would be challenge for an immigration consultant is that the parents may feel comfortable with sending the kid, but the kid may feel too anxious to go to another place and be separated from the parents. And I'd say that it is very important to be mindful.
Yeah, and that's a very good point.
Particular child.
That's a very good point that you made, because with some of the students that I meet, particular demographic, especially the place where I'm from or where my parents are from, let's say, because I can speak the same language, they tell, and I ask these students sometimes, why did you come to Canada? And they're like, well, I didn't really want to come, but the neighbor's kid went, so my parents forced me to come. And there is no sense of direction there. They don't really know what they're doing here. It's what's your advice for such students? How would you consider the psychology? What would you think would be the best response to such comment? Considering you might have seen similar cases, right?
I think I don't really, to be honest with you, I don't think that I see similar cases.
No, you don't. Okay.
Because there is a quite significant spectrum. So what you're talking about is sort of more or less, quote unquote, normal anxiety or inability to adjust, and we all are quite resilient. So you put a child in a certain environment, and they may learn. How much it would cost, that's a different story. So learning to do laundry at home is pretty cheap, but learning to do laundry in like in Indonesia may be very different. Because you don't know anything about how to even start, right? So what I'm trying to say is that I tend to see kids with who develop mental illness, like major depressive disorder. Not that they feeling kind of depressed, but they have actually medical condition that is major depressive disorder, or they have anxiety disorder. Not that they sort of like homesick. What I would say though is that maybe ask this, maybe tell if I was an immigration consultant, I would just be very open, and I would tell the parents that like at least 40% of immigrants give up in Canada and they return back home.
Yes, absolutely.
Maybe more. And maybe even more. And I would tell them that we want your child to be successful. So let's go down the list. What makes you think that they would survive independently with no support in a new country? So and then maybe how we can prepare them for that. Again, how to pay bills, how to do laundry, how to do shopping. Can they make their own meal? And if they cannot cook, where are they gonna get food, right? So if they do have mental health or physical health, who they gonna reach to?
And I should mention to our listeners that most institutions in Canada will have in-house services, in-house counseling services, maybe coaching services. Some of the counselors are also licensed psychotherapists, very different from psychiatrist. Ruben, can you tell our listeners a little bit what's the difference between a counselor at a school who's maybe a psychotherapist versus you?
Well, I think that to understand the system a little bit better, I think that it's important to understand what the mental illness or mental health needs are. And I like the model that was developed by, what's his name? Engel. No, sorry, I'm not. So like I'm blocking the name. So in any case, so
Yeah, Ruben,
I
you
like
could
the
say any
system.
name and I would still say yes because I
Sure.
wouldn't know.
Anyway, so that
Yeah, anyways.
it's so there was this person, I'm blocking on the name, who developed
Sure.
biopsychosocial model. So there is biology, that is our genes. So, for instance, if I have a child, but
Yeah.
I'm struggling with anxiety and depression, and my mother has suffered from depression, and my grandmother suffered from depression, so the chances are that my child may develop depression because they have the genes. So that's the biology. So the second part is social. So, and that's what we're mostly talking about is the social environment, is the support. So if I have a child who thrives in a close community, so they go to school with their cousins, they celebrate their birthday with their uncles and aunts, and they have extended family around them. So and they do very well in their close community. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if they just travel to another country and they have no one, that they will necessarily thrive. So that social environment can be a trigger to a lot of problems. So it is also can be an opportunity for enormous growth.
Yeah.
So I know that, for example, for me, that going through immigration process and getting to know people from Anglo-Saxon culture, from South Asian, from Oriental culture, from different cultures. Like in Scarborough, you can meet people from anywhere, Philippines, Iran, Afghanistan, like you name it. I probably met people from like all over the world. So that gave me that opportunity for personal growth, but also imposed a lot of challenge. So because when I go to my neighbors and they need help, they do not respond to me the same way as my aunts and uncles would have done if I was back home, right? So that's the social. So there is biological, number one, there is social, number two, and there is psychological. So psychological part is that how we perceive all of this challenge. So, for instance, if I like so that one analogy I use is if somebody steps on my toe on a bus ride, if I think they did it on purpose, that makes me feel angry. If I tell myself that it was an accident, I don't feel angry.
Yeah.
But the pain is about the same. So in this psychology, what I tell myself about my experiences, that affects the way how I feel, and as a result, it affects the way how I function. So let's say, what if somebody steps on my toe for the second time? And then I tell myself again that people did it on purpose. I may start seeing that there is a pattern, that people kind of mistreat me all the time, and then I may become sort of depressed and paranoid. That people sort of went on a bus with me to step on my toes. But if I tell myself that it's just an accident, it just doesn't affect me the same way. So, and when it comes to a therapist, like psychotherapist, psycho refers to psychology. Therapist refers to sort of treatment, like treating problems. So psychotherapists, they use the psychology sort of help people to perceive their life experiences differently, or like more realistic, I guess, when they experience some sort of problem. So, for example, I failed an exam, and I tell myself that I'm a total loser, so I'm going to fail, and I'm going to go back home, and I'm never going to settle in this beautiful country. So then I develop depression. So I go to a therapist and I say, well, what makes you think that you're a total loser? You just, like you passed another exam just last month. So, and say, wait a minute, that's true. That just me failing one exam does not necessarily mean that I'm going to fail the whole immigration process. So that may be overgeneralization. So, and that's what therapy does. So to be a psychotherapist, one does not need to be a medical doctor. Like I can do psychotherapy because I'm a psychiatrist, but I also should be able to do psychotherapy if I'm psychologist or a social worker or a child and youth worker.
Yes.
So that a lot of people with a lot of different background can provide the psychological treatment.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is that the difference is that when a person sees a psychiatrist, that is a person with the highest level of training. So we train to prescribe medications. We train to do psychotherapy.
Yeah.
So for the most part, we tend to see the most complex cases. Someone who has a very complex and complex needs that sort of need our expertise to kind of try to kind of tease this out. And again, people with severe mental illness who may need medications. So then they need to see a psychiatrist. But if they're going through a sort of adjustment to a new environment and trying to get used to the new friends and new culture, then they don't really need to see a psychiatrist.
Now, do you, and again, I might be projecting for some of our listeners who may already be diagnosed back home and have medication, etc., and who may need continued treatment when they come to Canada. Do you necessarily have referrals from institutions now you're located in Scarborough, okay, so maybe the schools in Scarborough or other parts of GTA, do you get referrals from counselors in these schools saying, okay, I think you need to meet Dr. Ruben? Or not particularly doctor, but you need to meet a psychiatrist, and they'll land up with to you, right? Do you see that usually with international students?
Well, see, in Canada, as much as we can, we do not treat a mental illness any different than any other illness. So, for instance, if you have a client who maybe has been treated for a depressive disorder or anxiety disorder back home, and they're rather stable, so they're taking the same medication for at least 6 months, for example, and so they're essentially stable. They do not need to see a psychiatrist. So, like any doctor can prescribe psychiatric meds. So there's nothing special about it. So it just, it's just medications. The only and also any doctor can make adjustments. They know there are certain guidelines that guide any physician what to do as a next step if someone develops more challenges. So they only make referral to see a psychiatrist if the primary care physician, like a family doctor, does not know what to do next.
Got it.
So I would say that we end up seeing international students usually when they're in severe crisis. For instance, if they were brought to emergency room.
Oh wow!
So that, and then from there they may be referred to see a psychiatrist. But there are different pathways. So of course that the referral, you said that the referral would come from a therapist. It has to come from another physician. So for instance, if so, kind of stepping back a little.
Sure.
So the way how it should work is that it's actually, so the system is pretty simple, straightforward, I'd say. So that the default treatment option is psychotherapy. So because we all need we all need coping skills to deal with to adjust to a new environment.
Okay.
So therapy is kind of go-to option.
Got it.
However, if a person, for instance, have suicidal thoughts, they don't want even to live anymore. What are the chances that they're going to listen to advice and start changing their life for better? They're already given up. They're not going to do that. So the psychotherapist doesn't have a magic touch. So they only can give an advice, something like, meditate regularly, challenge your negative thoughts, or like go to bed on time, exercise regularly, this kind of things.
Yeah.
But if a person doesn't want to live anymore, like what are the chances that they're going to go and sign up for yoga classes?
Yeah,
it's pretty unrealistic. So at that point, a therapist may say, look, you may need to see a doctor. So like you may need the medication as a stepping stone to kind of benefit even from therapy. And the therapist usually refer patients to see primary care first, unless they're in crisis, and that would be emergency room. And then the primary care doctor, they do assessment if they think that this is something that they can handle themselves, something like anxiety disorder or depressive disorder. They have no problem prescribing an antidepressant. However, if they keep prescribing the same antidepressant or maybe second antidepressant for past like 3 months and nothing gets better, so then at that point they may refer to a psychiatrist for more sort of expert assessment.
Because of the high volume of students that me and Olga see on a day-to-day basis, sometimes we do have students that profess mental health issues, depression, suicidal indications, etc. And after let's say weeks and weeks of communication, we sometimes realize that it may not be the case. And again, I feel very it's not something I it's not a word that I'd like to use, which I'm saying faking it, but and again, when we are approached by students who are professing mental health or suicidal tendencies, etc., we take them very seriously and we act upon it with every seriousness. Every case is taken with seriousness, and we would like and we do believe every student that comes to us is saying so, right? But what would I would probably say from a psychology point of view, how would you approach such a case? If as an advisor, what can I do better, right? Or should I just continue, okay, I'm going to believe everyone, I'm going to think the best of every case, and I'm going to think, okay, this is the truth for every case? And what would you say from a student perspective? How should they approach advisors if they are, incorrectly identifying certain mental health issues? I would like your take on both of us. How do I approach it as an advisor, and how should students approach us without saying, things that may not be accurate, right?
Well,
I know it's a two-tier question. Sorry.
No, that it is understandable, right? So that life is complex, and
Exactly.
sometimes people, there are situations when people make up symptoms for secondary gains. So we even have a diagnosis called malingering. So when someone makes up symptoms to avoid certain things, like again, it could be like an exam or something like that. And so for secondary gains, it may also get pretty complicated because people sometimes may consciously make up symptoms, but not to avoid a certain thing, but maybe to meet their own psychological needs. And in that case, it becomes actually very difficult to even identify what those needs are. And even meeting those needs may not necessarily solve the problem because it becomes a little bit too deep. But I'd say that from a counselor point of view, you should develop a certain policy. And maybe again coordinated with your managers or the like licensing authority, because there is a huge liability involved. So
Absolutely.
in this case, I'd say that the question you should ask yourself, if you have any safety concerns.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if somebody says that they're suicidal, then if I wasn't mental health professional, but I was like immigration consultant, I would just call 911.
Yeah,
I say, well,
and that's what we have been
so
advised as well.
essentially, I have this person on the line. They say that they're suicidal.
Yeah.
And then
we do
kind
have
of
wellness checks and things like that.
let the crisis kind of deal with that.
Yeah.
So if you're not, so let's say it's okay to ask direct question.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. For the most of the time, people tend to kind of, we humans, vast majority of us, we don't like to lie.
Hopefully not.
So it makes us uncomfortable. So and then if you ask a person like, do you have suicidal thoughts? Just direct question tends to lead to a direct answer. So sometimes what I see in my practice is that parents or again other professionals, they try to kind of dance around and try to guess, but then it never works, because like, how can you guess, right? It's just impossible. So then it's okay to ask a direct question, and then if there is no safety concern and the person needs support, again, I would direct them to professionals to say, we have this system, this is a phone number, essentially, this is where you should call to get more psychological support. For the students, for your clients, I can say that, don't lie. Because for mental health professionals, like after seeing, I don't know, like 600-700 patients every year, so it's not very hard for me to kind of spot out if somebody's making things up. So that may not be the best strategy. However, if a person does have psychological needs or mental health needs, again, same advice. Just like, you should request it directly. There is no shame in asking for help. So if you struggle and if you have suicidal thoughts or you have problems with focus or anxiety, reach out for help as soon as you can. The help presents itself.
Yeah, and this is definitely something that we do inform our students, especially different demographics, how different, I should say, every demographic has a different understanding of mental health, whether it's positive or negative, right? So this is something we tell our students, it is okay to seek help when you feel off, because sometimes a lot of people don't really know what's going on with them, right? So seeing a psychotherapist or seeing one of our counselors, making an appointment, just the first act of doing it and talking to a professional makes sense. And sometimes we, as immigration consultant, yes, we are an international student advisor, and sometimes the first point of contact, like I mentioned, we need to have our empathy gauge up to be open to listening to students' issues. And sometimes they just want to connect with someone that speaks the same language, or they don't really want to see a counselor. They just want to, take things out of their chest and just put it forward and tell someone, right? So I always keep an open ear, and I always try to put myself in their shoes and see, okay, how can I help this situation? If I feel that, okay, it might be going a little bit over my expertise or further away from my expertise, I will kindly ask them to book an appointment with a licensed counselor, and maybe that might be the next step. But many times students do, many times they don't. They just come back and talk to me, and I'm happy if I can provide an ear just to relieve them, and that's what I do. And we will have an episode with one of the insurance providers in Canada later on to kind of let listeners who are interested in studying in Canada about what kind of policies they'll have as an international students in certain institutions, what is covered. Do you have any experience in coverage in terms of insurance coverage? How much of it? I know every institution might be different. So,
Well, so that I'm not in a position to make any particular advice about the policies. I guess just in general. So what I said before, it's important to read the fine print.
Yes.
So
yes.
that so far. Things that I kind of ran into with the policies is what I mentioned before is that payment for the per occurrence.
Yeah.
So again, if my policy is $10 million, but I only pay per occurrence $100, it's it's not it's deceiving. So because it is not possible, so not realistic to kind of even use up this money in any kind of scenario.
Yeah,
That is a warning sign. So the way how I understand insurance should work is that there should be cases, in severe cases, I may need more that I'm paying, and then in sort of or I may use like the whole kind of amount in an extreme kind of situation. But if there is no realistic situation that may deliver me the whole full policy, then it's just fake.
Yeah.
Second thing that happens is that what I run into is if the insurance covers only emergency coverage. So the way how it works is that, especially with mental health, it's not possible to fix mental health issues in emergency room.
No.
What we typically do, if somebody comes in crisis to emergency room, we, regardless whether they need an admission for crisis or they get discharged home, but we tend to, we try to arrange outpatient follow-up, and some of the insurance plans do not cover outpatient follow-up. And that makes zero sense, because if the policy was designed to help people to again survive and get the services done, then you would not want them to go to emergency room every time when they need something. But going to emergency room may require sitting there from like 4 to 14 hours. And of course that is a deterrent. In some insurance companies, I feel that they use that deterrent to stop people from accessing help that they might actually need. Let me think for a second. Those are probably two main things.
Yeah.
The outpatient services as opposed to crisis only. So if I was a parent, I would probably try to reach out to insurance company and say, what happens if my child goes to emergency room, gets a prescription, and needs to see a doctor after the emergency room? Will that be covered?
Yeah.
So, and that does not necessarily have to be mental health. Let's say, like if a person broke their leg, so they get the cast and they go to emergency room. Well, they're going to need a couple of follow-up appointments, X-rays, so that is that going to be covered? So that when it comes to insurance. There was something else that you were talking about.
I know it's sometimes difficult because I know every institution has maybe different types of policies and things like that. And we will have an episode with one of the companies that provide insurance to international students later on. But I would like to thank you, Ruben, for taking the time and presenting us your great in-depth knowledge to our listeners. It's been really fantastic. I know it was kind of a last minute request, and I really thank you for the time. I do want our listeners to know that Ruben has his own YouTube channel. And how can our listeners find you?
Well, so that for the channel, it's Dr. Gagarin. It's DrGagarin.
Yeah.
So that's the name of the channel. And so what I do on my YouTube channel is I try to actually show complexities. It reflects actually well on what you mentioned about different cultures. See, there is mental health is very complex. As much as we try to simplify it by giving a particular diagnosis, and we try to put people in little boxes and prescribe them certain treatments to fix their problems, the real life becomes a lot more complicated. So what I try to do in my YouTube channel is to try to show the real life cases with its complexities. So just my next video I just recorded is about someone who is struggling with attention deficit disorder, lifelong anxiety, and
I saw that.
yeah. So that again,
I mean, I'm again as a layperson, sometimes I might have to rewatch something, but I've
so that
subscribed to your
real life is more complicated, and I guess what is relevant to our conversation today on my channel, I'm trying to talk about real people, not not a diagnosis. And then if you watch the videos, you can actually see that it should be like I'm trying to make it more relatable, and you see that there is a spectrum, and you may recognize some of the people who you know. And it's interesting
I hope
that
not. But due to privacy,
of course, like we know, no, you can't hope for that. It's a spectrum. You all of us, like vulnerable at some point. Or like to some degree.
I meant I thought you mentioned you might watch the video and remember someone from the cases you're mentioning. So that's why I said hopefully not due to privacy reasons.
Yeah. So no, of course that again that the formula that I came up with is that I say something like my real patient fake name or like fictional name.
And
so
I've seen that.
Of course that all of those details they change, but I try to stick to the story so that to give the viewers or listeners kind of good sense of what kind of things that we have to deal with on day-to-day basis.
And it's
one
a
thing that I
fantastic
think
channel.
is
I should
very
tell my
important.
listeners, please do follow it. I'm subscribed to Ruben's channel, and I will post the link in the description as well to the podcast so that our listeners can find you. Do you also have an Instagram account or Facebook that people can follow you?
No, I'm shy.
Nothing like that.
I'm too shy.
I mean, if you're creating YouTube videos, I think Instagram is okay.
Yeah, so like I'm working on it. So I'm unfortunately I'm too busy. But at some point, of course, like so just the YouTube for now. But then interesting, I think that it's very important for the for our listeners today to mention that you mentioned different cultures and people come from different places to Canada. Some places, for example, China and Russia, and I'm sure that there are other places in the world that that maintain some sort of central sort of roster, some sort of list and database of people with mental illness. I hear that frequently from the parents that bring kids to emergency room, and they want to know who is going to know about their diagnosis or their problems or their admission. So, and that is the biggest concern and one of the biggest obstacles, I think, for people to reach out for help. There are two main barriers, two main obstacles that for the students and their families to reach out for help. One is the stigma. So stigma means that in our mind, we kind of separate people into normal people and crazy people. So, and if so, like certainly I'm not crazy. So, and only crazy people go to see psychiatrists. So I can tell you that I have never seen a crazy person. I only have seen normal people who reach out for help and they struggle with mental illness. So, but in any case, so that is my approach. But if you start with saying that only crazy people go to see psychiatrists, and my child or like me not crazy, so therefore I don't need to see a psychiatrist, I don't need any help. That's what stigma essentially is. So, but if you approach it like I do, that we all kind of in the same boat, we all have our own mental health challenges, and we all need help, then you realize that reaching out for help, that's the only wise decision that one can make. So then that really helps with the stigma. But the second part that is very important, I think, for the international students to hear is that in Canada, their privacy is protected by law.
Absolutely.
So essentially, that's what you mentioned about my videos. I cannot go on a YouTube channel and mention your name and describe your story because that would be unethical and possibly illegal.
So and we do, and this is the other thing. We want our listeners to know that if you are facing mental health issues and you have to speak to our counselors, your counselors, they may not even tell us what is the issue, right? They may only be very specific line of queries that are asked by them in terms of, okay, would scenario A be particularly challenging for immigration, and we give them the answer, because they do not share any personal conversations that you had between them as per their ethical obligation or licensing obligations as well. So that's a very good point, Ruben. I concur.
So for example, in my practice, I have to so the way how it works, let's say you come in to see me, and let's say you tell me some personal secrets, and then you can tell me I really just sharing it in private, and I don't want anyone to know. Now, my task as a physician is to document and justify diagnosis and treatment. I don't have to document any personal secrets. So, for example, if somebody had some challenges with the law, so, for example, somebody comes in and tells me that they purchased an illegal drug or they broke a law, I don't have to write it down in my notes. I can say that the person is, let's say, for example, worrying about potential legal problems. So and that would be vague enough, but again, it gives my note enough weight to justify a particular diagnosis on treatment.
Absolutely.
Then, let's say my note may be a couple of pages. So when school, for example, Centennial College or like University of Toronto or any high school, I want my patient to get accommodations, to get help and support. So I write a letter to school, but that letter is only like 3 paragraphs. So there is nothing about their secrets or their problems or what they told me in my assessment. So at the max, it involves writing a diagnosis. But even then, my patients can say, well, I don't want to share my diagnosis. So then I would just say something like it's a medical condition. It is not ideal, but again, there are some sort of ways around it, and I request accommodations without disclosing any personal secrets. But it's a very important point is that the immigration services or colleges or schools, they do not have a legal access to one's medical records.
And that's, as an immigration consultant, I should let us listeners know as well. So sometimes when you do have challenges with immigration and you do have a letter from a counselor or a doctor or a psychiatrist, etc., sometimes it may help with your immigration case. And counselors will, like Ruben mentioned, psychiatrists, they only put enough information to make it a solid explanation, but vague enough, So I mean, not that that's nothing wrong in that because of privacy issues. they don't have to share, or they will not share the complete diagnosis with an external person like immigration.
Yeah, so I don't know. So there have been a couple of situations when I wrote letters to immigration, but again, I have never been in a position when I would have to share my notes.
No. I meant like they write a letter.
Even when I was even when I
history.
wrote letters, I usually would give it to my patients so they could read it and they know exactly what I'm sharing. So they always can tell me that what if I can we remove this, so that because I don't want this to share. So that essentially in Canada, everyone is in charge of their own personal medical information that is protected by law. And that is very important, and that is also true about mental health concerns.
Absolutely. Ruben, thank you so much. I know it's getting late as well. By the time we are completing this recording, it's about 10:30 at night, and I know you have work tomorrow. I want to let you go, and I want to really, really thank you for your time.
I'm so busy. I never sleep. No, of course, I appreciate that, but I want to say that if you if you're interested, if there are any particular questions, we can have a follow-up session and make it a little bit more relevant and focused.
Exactly. I was just going to mention to our listeners, you can email us at edutalkscanada@gmail.com. We have an Instagram page, EduTalks Canada. You can post your comments, questions. We do have a YouTube channel as well, EduTalks Canada. You can find our podcast and a lot of platforms that you listen to podcasts, whether it's Google Podcasts, Spotify. Put in your comments, questions, particular questions if you have for Ruben. You can also, again, visit Ruben's at Gagarin YouTube channel. At Dr. Gagarin. Dr. Gagarin YouTube channel. I will post your YouTube link in the description so people can find you. If they have questions for you particularly, they can send them to you directly. But your insight today was extremely, extremely helpful. And this is the intention of the podcast, to present listeners who are interested in studying in Canada with perspectives from different professionals that deal with international students, and not just an immigration perspective, not just an academic, but an overall what students can look forward to when coming to Canada, what they need to expect, what challenges, what solutions, etc. So we may come back again, Ruben. Hopefully we have questions from listeners, and maybe we can do another podcast with different set of scenarios, etc. Because I think mental health is the top priority for most students coming from let's say from a background that is or from an educational background that's very different, and seeking help, mental health solutions to facing such problems, whether it's in academics and social life, etc. So Ruben, thank you so much. We will meet again, Ruben. Thank you so much for today.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Again, I just recently started my YouTube channel, so if you wish to subscribe to listen to see to hear real life stories, I'd appreciate that. So thank you very much for your support, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you so much, and thank you all the listeners joining in for our third episode. We hope to see you soon again, and we look forward to your comments, questions. Thank you.
That is it for this episode of EduTalks Canada. All episodes are produced by Achuth Kesavan and TG Kutamparor. Opening theme song by Rex Banner, Goals. Be sure you subscribe to your favorite podcast platform and leave a review.